Have you ever felt like everything around you is falling apart? Like the ground beneath your feet just disappeared, and no one seems to notice? As if life is moving forward for everyone else except you? Maybe you spent the whole night staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where you lost your way. And the hardest part, perhaps you did everything right. You were honest. You prayed. You worked tirelessly. You tried to stay strong, kept your head up, but none of it seemed to matter. And now, the only thought echoing in your mind is, I can't go on. I'm exhausted. And in that weariness, the idea of giving up begins to feel like the only possible choice. But listen, it's not. Because even when you can't see a way out, hope still exists. Even when it seems like God is silent, He's still at work. I know, it's difficult to believe. But even Jesus went through something like this. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He said, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. It was the very Son of God, moments away from sacrificing His life, crying out for help. So if Jesus Himself felt overwhelmed, why do you think it's wrong for you to feel pain? Why do you believe that your weakness makes you unworthy? It doesn't. On the contrary, it makes you human. And it's in that place of brokenness, weariness, and shattered pieces that God performs His greatest miracles. So often, we ask God to pull us out of the storm. But sometimes, the miracle isn't in escaping the storm, it's in learning to walk through it without sinking. Do you remember Peter, when Jesus called him to step out onto the water? As long as he kept his eyes fixed on Jesus, he walked. But the moment he looked at the wind, he began to sink. And maybe that's what's happening to you. You started well, full of faith, but then the wind came. You lost your job. A frightening diagnosis arrived. Someone betrayed you, and you took your eyes off Jesus. That's when faith begins to tremble. But even then, Jesus reached out and caught Peter. He didn't let him drown, and He won't let you drown either. Maybe you're in a moment where everything feels still. No doors are opening. No answers are coming. God's silence cuts deeper than anything anyone could say. But listen, His silence doesn't mean He's gone. It means He's preparing. Did you know that 25 years passed between God's promise to Abraham and the birth of Isaac? 25 years of waiting for something God had spoken. And still, Abraham believed. Maybe you've been waiting 5 months, or 5 years, and you're already thinking of giving up. But God's timing isn't like ours. While you wait, He is moving in places you cannot see. He is shaping you, strengthening you, teaching you how to trust Him, even when nothing makes sense. And what if I told you that the pain you're feeling now is shaping the strength you'll carry tomorrow? That these tears you cry are watering a seed of change? That what's making you weep today will become the story that lifts someone else tomorrow, someone who'll be right where you are now? Because the truth is, life won't always be easy. There will be dark nights. There will be lonely days. But there will also be renewal. Because God is a master of fresh starts. And maybe right now, you're thinking, but I can't take it anymore. Then let me ask you, how many times have you said that, and yet, you're still here? How many times did you think you couldn't make it, but somehow, you did? Do you know why? Because there is a strength in you that defies explanation. A power that comes from a God who never gives up, who calls you by name, who sees your pain when no one else does, who understands the prayers you can't even put into words, who turns desperation into hope. Maybe you feel invisible, like no one notices how hard you're fighting. But God sees you. He saw when you cried quietly in the bathroom. He saw when you forced a smile in the middle of your pain. He saw when you stayed silent just so no one else would worry. And He wants to remind you, you're still here, on your feet, scarred, yes, but still fighting. And that, in itself, is already a triumph. So don't give up. Not now. Because the page that feels like the end might just be the beginning of the most beautiful chapter in your journey. And when you are at your weakest, that's exactly when God's strength is revealed in its fullest. He will lift you in His arms. He will renew your energy. And one day, when you look back, you'll understand, it was worth pressing on. Maybe today, you don't even have the strength to pray. So just whisper, God, hold me. And He will. He'll carry you to a place where your pain turns into purpose. To that moment when you'll be able to stand on the other side of the valley and say, I made it through, and I overcame. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. There are still promises yet to be fulfilled. The road ahead still exists. And God is still on the throne. He is not done with you. Have you ever stopped to wonder whether what looks like an ending is actually the dawn of something far greater? Sometimes life knocks us down so hard that every part of us wants to write the end. But God doesn't deal in full stops, He deals in commas. What you see as closure, He sees as transformation. What feels like failure to you, He calls preparation. Scripture is filled with stories of people who thought they were cast aside but were actually being shaped for something divine. Take Moses, for example. He spent 4 decades in the wilderness before returning to Egypt. 40 years feeling unqualified, carrying a tainted past, and doubting his worth. But it was this very man, hidden from the spotlight, that God chose to set an entire nation free. He wasn't the most fluent speaker. He wasn't the strongest leader. He was the one who showed up, trembling hands and all. And doesn't that echo something in your own life? How many times have you felt like everything was lost? How often did you think God had turned away from you? And yet somehow, you kept going. Perhaps you've had to say goodbye to a relationship you thought would last forever. Perhaps you watched a lifelong dream wither in front of your eyes while you forced a smile through silent tears. Or maybe you've been feeling outdated, overlooked, like no one sees your worth anymore. But what the world labels as the end of the line, God calls a fresh start. His word says, "Behold, I am making all things new." And for something to be made new, the old must come to an end. Sometimes you have to lose your job to find your true calling. Sometimes someone's absence pushes you closer to your Father's embrace. Sometimes pain is the only push strong enough to move us forward. It's not fair. It's not easy. But it's real. And once you understand that God's plans surpass yours in wisdom and greatness, something shifts inside you. You stop asking why, and start asking what for. Now imagine if David had accepted the label of being just the youngest and least important son. Even his own father didn't consider him when the prophet came looking for the next king. Yet God saw him, not by appearance, but by heart. You might be feeling invisible, disregarded, set aside. But God sees you. He's not focused on your failures, your past, or your flaws. He sees your heart. He sees your commitment. He sees the effort you make, even when no one else notices. How many times have you gone to bed feeling like a failure, and woken up the next day carrying the weight of the world? And still, you pushed through. That makes you brave. That makes you extraordinary. And do you know why? Because God didn't call you to be flawless. He called you to be willing. He doesn't choose those who have everything. He chooses those who surrender everything. He turns the unlikely into instruments of change. He turns the outcast into a source of wisdom. He turns the broken into living proof that healing is real. Have you heard of Oprah Winfrey? She was born into extreme poverty. She endured abuse as a child and lost her baby in infancy. Countless television networks turned her down. They said she didn't fit the profile, that she was too emotional. But she refused to quit, because deep inside, she knew what was inside her was far greater than any rejection she faced. Today, she stands among the most influential women in the world. And do you know why? Because she realized that hitting rock bottom can be the very place where the voice of God becomes clearest. And maybe that's exactly where you find yourself now, in a moment where everything feels dark, motionless, and hopeless. But listen closely to what I'm about to tell you with every ounce of conviction. Your suffering is not meaningless. Your waiting is not wasted. What you're going through now is only one chapter in a story that will eventually make sense. It might not be today. It might not even be tomorrow. But the time will come when you'll look back and see that each tear was a seed. Every closed door was a layer of protection. Each silence held a divine answer. Sometimes, the greatest act of faith is simply to keep walking when every part of you is begging to stop. It's choosing to say, "I still believe," even when you can't see the way ahead. It's trusting that God is guiding your steps, even when He feels far away. And when you do that, when you keep believing against all odds, you become unshakable. Not because you no longer feel fear, but because you've learnt how to move forward despite it. Do you think Paul didn't feel pain when he was thrown into prison? That Mary didn't shed tears as she watched her son suffer on the cross? That Joseph never questioned why his own brothers betrayed him? And yet, each of them came to a profound understanding. God never lets suffering go to waste. He turns each wound into a calling, each setback into a testimony, every tear into a source of renewal. So please, don't give up. There are still chapters waiting to be written. There are promises still waiting to be fulfilled. There are destinations that only you were created to reach. You are not a mistake. You have not been forgotten. You are part of something eternal. And God is still holding the pen. Some battles come to tear us down. Others come to reveal who we truly are. And it's in the fiercest storms, in the deepest pain, in the most silent deserts, that our real strength rises to the surface. Not the strength that can be seen with the eyes, but the kind known only to those who have wept in silence. The strength that's born when you refuse to give in, even when every path seems blocked. When you continue onwards without having all the answers. When you choose to press on, even while bleeding internally. The Bible says in the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 3, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. Perhaps right now, you're walking through that very phase of suffering. You're carrying grief, facing rejection, dealing with the aftermath of wrong decisions, or simply being overwhelmed by situations you never asked for. And yet, here you are, listening, breathing, trying. That already speaks volumes about your courage. How many times have you had to swallow your pain so no one else would worry? How many nights have you cried silently, hoping sleep would take the ache away, and then got up the next morning as if nothing was wrong? Have you noticed just how many battles you fight alone, quietly, while the world assumes you're fine? That, right there, is your strength. Not in the days when life is smooth, but in the moments when everything is falling apart and yet you're still standing. Wounded, yes, but upright. And it is in these very battles that God reveals your true identity, not as someone weak or defeated, but as someone refined by fire. Someone being prepared not just to endure, but to inspire others who are barely hanging on. Someone who doesn't just go through the pain, but grows because of it. This is why, more often than not, God doesn't remove you from the storm. He walks with you through it. Think about how many times you've wanted to give everything up, and still, you pressed on. That is more than strength, it's purpose. It's the hand of God holding you up when you thought you had nothing left. You might not see it now, but the version of you being shaped through all this will emerge braver, more compassionate, and full of faith. You will be someone who one day looks back and says, "It was harsh, it hurt deeply, but it was worth it. Because through it all, I found who I am in God." Nick Vujicic is living proof of that truth. He was born without arms or legs. He endured mockery, identity crises, and even wrestled with thoughts of ending his life. But somewhere deep within, a louder voice cried out, "You're not finished yet." Today, he travels across the globe, sharing messages of hope with millions. Not because everything went smoothly for him, but because he refused to let pain dictate his identity. And perhaps the same could be true for you. Maybe you're standing on the edge of your endurance. But that edge, right there, is often the exact moment when God's power begins to show. Because when you whisper, "I can't go on," he replies, "Now, let me step in." The turning point comes when you realize you don't have to be strong all the time. You don't need to have every answer. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. What you need is to trust, and to keep going, step by step, day by day. Because faith isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to walk despite the fear. It's rising even when your strength is gone. It's believing even when you can't see anything changing. And it's from this kind of faith that miracles are born. Think about Joseph. Betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, wrongly imprisoned. At every stage, it looked like failure. Yet through each trial, his character was being shaped. And when the time was right, God placed him in a position of great authority. If he had given up along the way, he never would have become governor over Egypt. And perhaps that painful place you're in right now is the very place that will carry you into your purpose. If I may suggest a challenge to you, let it be this. For the next 30 days, every time you feel like giving up, speak this out loud: "I am being strengthened." It may sound simple, but words carry tremendous power. The Bible tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. And when you begin to speak life over your journey, something starts to shift inside you. At first, it might be too subtle to notice, but slowly, strength returns. Faith grows, and the things that once paralyzed you no longer hold the same grip. You are not defined by your pain, nor by your past, nor by your mistakes. You are defined by what God is building within you right now. And what He is building doesn't take shape in comfort. It takes root in perseverance. It grows on those days when you choose to trust, even without understanding. Once you grasp this, you stop viewing your battles as punishments and begin to see them as preparation. God isn't just rescuing you from something. He's preparing you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. Believe me, this pain has an end. But the strength it leaves in you, that will remain forever. Maybe you still don't understand why all of this is happening. Maybe you look around and wonder why there's so much suffering, why the pain feels endless, why it seems like your life is caught in a never-ending storm. But hear this with your heart: not one moment of what you've endured, or are enduring, is wasted. God does not discard a single tear. Not one wound. Not a single disappointment. What you call a scar, he calls a testimony. What you see as your past, he sees as your training ground. Even your pain has a divine purpose. And often, that purpose is not just to change you, but to change those around you. Some people will only be reached through your story. People who might never step into a church or listen to a sermon, but who will listen to your journey of overcoming. People who have lived through similar pain, but never found the words to talk about it. People who need to see someone else rise so they can believe they can rise too. And maybe, without even realizing it, you are being raised up as the answer to those lives. Remember Joseph? He wasn't just healed from the wounds of betrayal or the injustice he faced. He was positioned. God used everything that looked like a detour to bring him to the exact place where he could preserve lives. And when he came face to face with his brothers again, he didn't say, "You ruined me." He says, "You planned evil against me, but God turned it into something good, so that today many lives could be saved." This has never been just about you. It never was. Sometimes we beg God to take away the pain, but what if he intends to use it for something far greater? Something that will bless countless others. Something that will restore faith in those who feel they have none left. Something that will breathe hope into hearts that are close to giving up. Perhaps what you're feeling right now is the weight of a calling. And yes, a calling comes with pain. It demands sacrifice. It asks for faith when every part of you wants to stop. But it's that very surrender that turns your life into a bridge between despair and hope, between hurt and healing, between giving up and beginning again. Have you ever noticed how people draw closer when you're honest about your struggles? Have you seen how someone might stop and say, "I thought I was the only one who felt like that"? The truth is, everyone is carrying some kind of burden, but few are brave enough to say it out loud. And when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you become powerful in God's hands. Because it's not your success that brings people together. It's your truth. It's your process. It's your broken heart being pieced back together over time. Maybe you've been waiting to feel whole before you start speaking up, before you begin helping others. But sometimes, God will use you in the middle of your pain. Even while you're still bleeding, he'll place words of life in your mouth. Even with tears running down your face, he'll use you to lift someone else. Because healing often starts the moment you choose to become the answer, even if your own prayers haven't all been answered yet. And let's be honest, this is not easy. It takes courage. It takes faith. It means laying aside your pride, your shame, your fear of being misunderstood. But when you do it, when you hand over your wounds to God and let him turn them into purpose, something incredible starts to unfold. Those who once looked at you with pity begin to look at you with admiration. They begin to draw inspiration. They begin to believe. Because you didn't give up. Because you chose to be a vessel, even in your brokenness. Have you heard the story of the Christian singer Lauren Daigle? She was rejected by several record labels. Told that her voice wasn't marketable. That she was too different for the industry. She went through seasons of doubt, discouragement, and thoughts of giving up. But she didn't stop. And when she finally released the song You Say, it resonated with thousands around the world. Not because it was a flawless production, but because it was honest. Because it came from a soul that had suffered, that knew rejection, but still chose to sing. And maybe you're not a singer. Maybe you don't write. But your life is an open letter. And people are reading it. People are watching how you respond. How you carry on. How you still hold on to faith. Lives are being touched through you without you even knowing it. And heaven itself moves when you choose not to give up. So take a deep breath. And understand this. You are not fighting for nothing. Every time you rise, even when you're exhausted, every time you choose to trust, every time you offer a shoulder, a word, a smile even in your pain, you're leaving eternal imprints. Marks that perhaps only heaven will count. But they're shaping something far greater than you can imagine. You may have come this far feeling useless, unseen, forgotten. But God sees in you a precious instrument. Someone he longs to use. Someone who can shift atmospheres. Who can raise others up. Who can echo a kind of hope this world no longer offers. And if you're hearing this now, then yes, this message is for you too. Because your life is still an answer. Because your testimony will bring healing. Because your journey was never in vain. There are still many to be reached through your story. You weren't broken to be discarded. You were broken to be rebuilt and used. And God is still going to do it. You will witness it. But right now, I want you to do something. Just for a moment, take a deep breath. Close your eyes. Block out the noise of the world, the pressures, the criticism, the anxiety, the debts, the regrets, the comparisons, the scars from the past, leave it all aside for now. Just for a few seconds, let this truth sink into your heart. You're still standing. And that alone is nothing short of a miracle. You've walked through storms that no one knew about. You've survived nights that felt like they would never end. You've carried pain you didn't even have words for. You kept going when everything inside you wanted to give up. And even with invisible wounds, even while bleeding on the inside, you didn't quit. Maybe you did fall down. Maybe you cried in silence. Maybe you felt forgotten, pushed aside, or lost. But you're still here. You might be shaking, you might be quiet, but you haven't vanished. And that means more than you realize. Because in the eyes of God, every tear you've cried is worth more than gold. Every step you've taken, no matter how unsteady, is honored in heaven. Every single effort, even the ones that failed, is treasured. You don't have to be doing well to be loved. You don't have to have it all together to be accepted. You just need to keep moving forward, one day at a time, one breath at a time. Even a whispered prayer, soaked in tears, is enough to touch the heart of God. There will be people who won't understand your pain. But God does. He was right there that night when you lay down and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." He saw it. He heard it. And more than that, He stayed. He never left your side. He was the strength beneath you when you thought you couldn't stand another second. And that's why you made it to this point. Now, just imagine what still lies ahead. Imagine the day when you'll look back and suddenly understand why you had to endure all those trials. Why things took so long. Why that painful no had to happen. Why there were moments of silence. Imagine the beauty of that moment when everything falls into place. When you'll finally be able to say, it was worth it not giving up. Imagine discovering that your life was the answer to someone else's prayer. That your battle helped heal another soul. That your journey lifted someone who had fallen. That your fresh start inspired an entire generation. You are not insignificant. You are not weak. And it's not too late for you. God is still writing. Still transforming. Still rebuilding. Still bringing the dead things back to life. And now, maybe with tears in your eyes, maybe with a heart that's heavy, I just ask one thing of you. Don't give up. Even if no one understands. Even if no one walks with you. Even if the path seems hidden in darkness, keep going. Because heaven still has promises to fulfill in your life. There are still beautiful chapters waiting to be lived. And there is still glory to be revealed. You are not a mistake. You are not random. You are not forgotten. You are a divine purpose. You are deeply loved. And God still has something extraordinary He wants to do through your life. Please, don't leave before you see it. You will overcome. You will smile again. And the world will still hear the story of someone who chose to keep going.